once in a while read the news. I don't generally read news, but I do for the show. And I specifically look up news in Florida. And I try to find things that are not the typical story of the day. And I came across an article about what you're doing in your organization. And I thought, that's really cool. We need to do that here. So I thought at a minimum, I'd love to meet you and get you on the show. So talk a little bit about, because I know that you're affiliated with a national thing, but talk a little bit about like what's going on that inspired you to at least create this local version, if you would.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, I'm born and raised in Central Florida. And so this is home for me. And like myself and a lot of people I love, we've dealt with the housing situation here. So as I looked around my community and was inspired by a lot of other folks doing some incredible work in Orlando, I thought, what can I do to get involved here? And this was an issue that, again, for me, was personal for myself and people I love. So I jumped into trying to figure out how we can advocate for this best. And we looked to some of our other incredible advocates in Orlando. You mentioned Anna Escamani earlier. Yeah. She's one. I should add, you mentioned her maps. In the new maps, I'm no longer in her district. I've always been her constituent. So when you talk to her, ask her about the College Park area, because we're going to miss her. But, inspired by folks like her, like Representative Carlos Smith, like so many others in Orlando who dove into the issues. And this was one for me that felt important to get into. And so, there was something, as soon as we started talking about a potential solution to this, it just kind of took off. Jen, you said you read the news often in Orlando. I feel like every day, or at least multiple times a week, it's on the front page of the Orlando Sentinel or one of our other major papers or sites around here. The housing affordability crisis, housing affordability, housing, sprawl, no infill housing. And one thing that I noticed is that in very few of those articles did it talk about policy. It just stated the problem. And the way I viewed it, my background is in economics. I thought this is a policy problem. And there are people who are responsible for this who are not being held to account. Because when we just talk about the problem and aren't talking about the policies that are leading to the problem, people are getting off the hook. And so part of the reason that a few of us started this organization was to make that case and talk about the policies that are in part leading to this crisis, and then propose some potential solutions to help try to fix it. So that's what we embarked to do. We're about a year old now, just about a year old. And so, yeah, we can talk a little bit more about it, but that's why we came together, was we saw a problem. No one was talking about how to fix it in our view. And so we wanted to do that. Yeah.
And I think that that's great. And I just like the whole concept of getting the NIMBY thing. And I am that generation, unfortunately. I mean, I'm Gen X. Like that's what, but I will say for the most part, what it referenced for me growing up was like nuclear and waste and those kinds of plants. It wasn't really affordable housing. So like, I was never averse to, all different levels of housing, but when we were coming on, we said like, there's plenty of housing. There is no shortage of housing. Like, and I know that where you are so overdeveloped, super developed, but in all the wrong ways. So talk about like, what is the current status of the unhoused? What is the current, because I would imagine it's off the charts, and I would imagine that there's lots of unoccupied housing.
Yeah. So I would say both in the wrong ways and in the wrong places. So when we look at the data on housing, at least in the Orlando area, we recently had some census data. So there's three stats that I think are important here. The one is in the greater Orlando area. Over the last 10 years, the population has increased at a rate of 1.5 times as fast as the housing supply. So Orlando is just growing. At one point, this was pre-pandemic, but it was something like 1,000 people a week were moving to Orlando. So just a ton of people are moving here, and the housing hadn't kept up. The second was that the rental vacancy rate in Orlando proper is about 5%. And what you really want is closer to 10, 15, right? Because when we hear stories of an apartment goes up for rent in downtown Orlando and there's 100 applicants the same day, the tenants don't have any power in that arrangement. And then the last one that we cite is the number of homes for sale in Orlando is at a record low. There's fewer homes for sale today than ever before. So, but to your point, Jen, a lot of what we've seen in Orlando is sprawled housing, is housing on the far outskirts of the city. What we talk about is what we call housing near opportunity. Where are we putting housing near jobs and housing near transit? Orlando has this commuter rail system, regional rail system called Sunrail that we've invested, us in the state, and there's been federal dollars supported as well, billions of dollars to build this out. And we don't really have outside of a lot of these rail stations, you see surface parking lots and single family homes. That's where we want to be building our housing, not further and further away from the core of our city where commutes are far. Often you're paying toll roads to get to your work. It's not an environmentally sustainable way to build. And so where we want that housing to be is in the core of our region so that people can live near where they're working, can walk places, can bike places, can take the bus, can take the train, and not have to rely on cars to get there. So that's a lot of what we deal with. Sometimes I joke that if I were to ever write a book, it would be called Highways to Nowhere, the story of Central Florida growth, because that's what we do. And I'm sure, and I know South Florida as well, North Florida does it too. You build a highway, no one needs it, but you know who needs it is the landowner who owns a bunch of land in the middle of nowhere who now can build houses on it because there's a highway out there. So we've seen that over and over again. And what we really focus on is building densely within our cities so that we don't have to sprawl and put housing in what we would consider to be the wrong place.
We're speaking with Austin Valle of YIMBY in Orlando, Florida. Austin, we are huge advocates for high-speed rail. I think that would have a tremendous impact on especially the I-4 corridor where everything is just, it's so overdeveloped, much like South Florida. What are some of the initiatives that you think would help alleviate some of these obvious issues regarding, I mean, we know what the problems are related to what is being built, what isn't being built, but in terms of, I think transportation is a huge part of this equation, as you just alluded to. So do you see high-speed rail as being, akin to one of the main benefits that could come from something like this? And are there other things that you think would also be beneficial?
Yeah, high-speed rail, light rail, all rail, all of the above. More, we like to see too more frequent and reliable bus service that reaches all parts of our county. We want to see dedicated space to this sort of transit, potentially even replacing lanes that are dedicated to cars and replacing those for bus-only lanes for really rapid bus transit systems. In general, and this is a really important point, is you're exactly right, Peter. Transportation and housing go together. You for the type of walkable, sustainable density that we're talking about, you really need transit as part of that equation. People often say that Orlando is full. And, I like to say Orlando has plenty of room for more people, but we're running out of room for more cars. Cars take up a lot of space. I was talking to a nearby mayor of a more suburban area outside of Orlando, and they had looked at the data in their city and showed that 2/3 of the developed land in their city was dedicated to roads and parking lots. And only 1/3 was dedicated to buildings. And that would include housing and commerce and things like that. So we're using our space in the wrong ways. Transportation is a key part of that to make sure that we can have that sort of density here. Walking to where you need to go. We shouldn't need a 2-ton steel killing machine to go get a quart of milk. You should be able to walk to go get that in a properly built, dense city. And in Orlando, that's quite rare. And to have that sort of amenity is exorbitantly expensive. It should not be a luxury good for your child to be able to walk to school.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.